From PolyMarket, ladies and gentlemen, it's a good day to be Trump. He is currently up 15.7 in the PolyMarket election forecast. My friends, I am flabbergasted at this result. This is insane. I mean, when we started the show, I think it was way lower than this. Now we're getting the rounding up 16 point lead for Donald Trump. They're saying he's going to take Pennsylvania. He's up 12 points. Again, this is PolyMarket. This is betting. This is people saying, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. When we jump to the aggregate betting odds from Real Clear Politics, he's up 13.1 across all betting markets. I think money talks and BS walks. I think after Kamala Harris has done this string of press trying to improve her numbers because she was sinking, all it did was make it substantially worse. If she goes on Joe Rogan, it's the apocalypse. I don't see how she turns things around. She went on with Charlemagne the God, and I don't think that's going to do anything for her. She's trying, don't get me wrong. But even right now in the top battleground states, take a look at this. Donald Trump is up 0.7 points across all battlegrounds. If you take a look at the national, where Harris is up 1.3, at this time in 2020, Joe Biden was up 9.4. Hillary Clinton was up 6.7, and she still lost. It is looking very, very much like Donald Trump is going to win. That being said, shadow campaign. So y'all better get out and vote. Because you look at this, you think Trump's going to win. If you say Trump's going to win, he's going to lose. So I'm going to tell you right now, that 15-point lead, 16-point lead that he's got makes it neck and neck. The polls could be wrong, but you know there's going to be shenanigans. You've got to swamp the vote. That's what Trump's been saying. Everyone's got to go vote. You got to bring your friends and family. Tell them, hey, you all got to go vote. You got to register to vote. Make sure, because a deadline is coming up for a lot of places. Many places already passed. You got to go vote. And then Trump's going to win if everybody goes vote. But what do you think? Do you think these betting markets are good or what? Or are, as someone super chatted, are the betting markets just the jabberings of the public that won't come true?
I publicly said yesterday that I think Trump's going to win. I said that in my YouTube community notes. I stand by that. And I say these things so that you know I'm not a charlatan, because only by being in a place where you can publicly lose do people know if you're just making stuff up. I think Trump's going to win. I mean, I thought he would win for the last 6 months because just all of the current seems to flow in his favor. Almost every new piece of news is something that makes Trump look better, and almost every new piece of news is something that makes Kamala look worse. And I mean, just if you look at actions, the left is clearly desperate and the right is clearly optimistic. I think Trump's going to win.
I think that like these markets are important to look at because it's good to have the data, but right now, I'm actually very skeptical of all polling. And again, in part, it's because part of the country just got knocked out by this hurricane. I mean, how are you polling people in North Carolina in the red counties where they don't have internet right now? I think that we've known for a little while. I think it was something, one of the major new polls put out, maybe it was Time Siena, that there are like 4% of voters that respond to polls right now say they're undecided. And we know of those, actually, it's more like 2% are truly, truly undecided. The other two probably have an intention one way or the other. I think one of the things that Kamala is never going to be able to overcome, and definitely not now, this late in the game, with so many things, to your point, working in Trump's favor, is that she is up against the personality of a future American folk hero. Even if you don't like Trump, he has a very distinct personality. He's developed a very unique political movement, and they can't just sort of drop Democrats into the same tired campaign and produce someone who becomes someone people are motivated to turn out for. I mean, even if they put her on every cooking show in America and she made her collard greens, you know, it's not enough time to make her endearing. And if she was endearing, they would have done it by now. So they have this sort of paper candidate with a bad platform that, you know, as she releases specifics, and I don't know if we're going to talk about the marijuana conversation today, but it makes people more irritated with her. Whereas Trump gives specific, the media gets mad, but the American people listen. And to me, I mean, you'll see this reflected in the opinion polls or in betting market odds where Trump is just more likable, and there's no way she could overcome that.
The criticism right now is that Kamala's pitch to black men is free money and free drugs.
I mean, that is essentially the attempt, but it's just so disheartening that politicians on the left are blatantly trying to purchase votes. Like, we'll give you free loans. We will give you money. It's as close to an offer of a direct cash payment as you can possibly get. Joe Biden made the offer of, we're going to forgive student loans. And they did some. I know that they didn't do it as
Not
broad.
really, though. I mean, they failed on that promise. That was the thing about this free money promise. They'll say, oh, yeah, we'll give you money. And people are like, I don't know, maybe. But they act without the authority, without the agreement with Congress.
I mean,
and so they don't deliver.
Thankfully, the Supreme Court has, shut them down. But I don't know the details, but I was under the impression that they did do some kind of programs or something like that, where some were. But even still, the point is, our government is not designed to be a service provider. It's not supposed to be giving people money. It's not supposed to be purchasing votes. The point of government is to protect private property rights, to give you courts for redress of grievances, and to protect the border. And it's failed at protecting the border. It's questionable whether or not the courts are reliable anymore. And it definitely doesn't protect private property when it's expropriating property so that way it can redistribute it. So the entire government has failed on every level. The federal government has failed on every level. And the fact that the American people allow it to continue to do this and don't vote for significant change. Kamala's out here saying we're ready for change. They were. I just heard her talking about one of her stump speeches, talking about we're ready for a change. We're ready for a change. It's like, you're coming from Joe Biden's administration. There is no change if you get into office.
Right.
And it's just so ridiculous that there is a large enough portion of the American people that are believing this. That it's frustrating that is the case, I suppose, is where I'm leading. It's frustrating that there are people that think this is an acceptable state of affairs.
I wonder how many people do feel like it's an acceptable state of affairs. I think that there are a portion of
42%.
The thing is, there are a portion of American voters, and this is true for both parties. I'm not trying to just be anti-left here, but who will vote in compliance with the party no matter what. So she could say anything, but if she is endorsed by the Democrats, they're going to vote for her. So if we say that's like what? I would say that's close to 30% of that percentage, but maybe it's 20. The other ones are either people who have decided that she is good or have some other reason for not wanting to vote for Trump. I mean, there is this anti-Trump sentiment that exists, although I really think that he is a known quantity. He is not this like random mystery they can run. Kamala Harris just could not put on a good campaign if she wanted to, because there is no connection among her staff and her advisors to the rest of America. They don't know how to pitch things. And that's why you are seeing, and again, obviously we have to acknowledge that her campaign is like, 3 months old. She started July 21st. But that's why you're seeing a huge late in the game pivot, that she's suddenly doing media. Suddenly she wants to have Republicans be part of her cabinet. Suddenly she wants to be bipartisan. Actually, after her history as a prosecutor, she doesn't think you should be arrested for marijuana possession. Actually, she is open to all kinds of things, and she likes fracking. I mean, she wasn't even the same person that she was in July when she announced this candidacy, let alone who she was when she ran on her own in 2020. And I think that there is a certain portion of Americans that know that. And even though they may ultimately cast a Democratic ticket, it's not because they love Kamala. It's because they feel loyal to the party.
I'm going to throw out a strange combination, Aristotle and game theory. So I can explain why both of those vote for those demographics, and it's inside their self-interest if you look at those two things. In pre-modern political philosophy, they said that society is an ecosystem of basically different kinds of animals that have different interests. So there's the lion on top, there's the bear, whatever. It's symbolic. They didn't actually think France is divided between various animals. And I think it's important because we view the world as homogenous, and the reality is there's a lot of different subgroups. And so for game theory studies, as an example, consistently, you can move 60% of the population by changing the consensus. So in multiple game theory studies, if you can change what the consensus people believe, you'll jump from 20% support to 80% support. Furthermore, there's a 20% demographic that always try to do good and are selfless, and there's a 20% that are always parasitic no matter what in game theory studies. So as a society, left's duty is to basically bully the parasitic 20% and then get the 60% to be part of a consensus for the 20% who are selfless. So that's part of it. Second thing is that Filibonti really got onto this point well of it's the abdication of responsibility for Kamala's side of things. So their entire strategy is divesting of the national interest for private interest. And this is something Aristotle talked about, where all of Aristotle's political philosophy was based off how do you establish the best incentives for people to not predate from the system. And so what you're looking at here with Kamala's voters is you as an individual will get stuff at the expense of society. And this is largely people who don't conceptualize society at all. They're not thinking to themselves, if we do this, everything's going to fall apart, because that's not in their mental framework. And this is why the right and the left have different concepts of money, where the right sees money as something that's actively generated. So if you lower taxes, more money is going to be generated. The left doesn't mentally process that, and so they just see the money as a pie to divide. So there's a lot of money to the divide, and they have no concept. The left has no concept of things as living or as group phenomena, and so they'll just say, oh, they also can't just make a distinction between individual and group. So, for example, if you let one trans person into a women's bathroom, there would be no bad consequences, and they choose not to differentiate between that. And this is a social standard that will happen for decades, because it's a very different matter between, let's say, when you give money to one friend in distress to your entire society gives all your money to people in distress.
Right. There's a funny meme where it says, one way to know if you're dealing with someone of low intelligence is to say something that is true, such as, on average, Asians are shorter than Europeans. And if they respond with something like, not all Asians, you know you're dealing with a person who can't think in abstract.
Yes. That's Naxalt. It's I'm not going to get into this, but you have theories at tiers of consciousness, and they're basically Naxalt or not all X are like that. It's a weird mental tier the left exists in where you're so intelligent you argue yourself back into stupidity. Because if you're a tribal people in the Amazon, you just think you leave meat out for the ancestor gods and the ancestor gods respect you. Yeah. That's a very simplistic worldview, but it works for you. Actually, it's not simplistic. There's lots of ancestor gods, but we're not going to get into that. And so for the left, they're taking from all these advanced authors like Schopenhauer and Hegel, people who are very intelligent Marx, and then they drive it into the stupidest possible conclusion because they think if I can make an argument, that makes it the correct argument. And all of their logic is based upon everyone being the same, everyone being equal, and then there are no consequences for actions.
Michael Malice said that he defines the new right simply by asking one question. Do you believe that some people are better than others?
Yeah. I mean,
easy answer, right?
I don't like Malice's distinction of the right because I think he was looking at it in the 2010s, and I think the ecosystem. I need to make a video about this. I was thinking when I was in the hotel here, I need to make a video on the factions of the new right, because I think those factions are going to end up dominating national politics and history. Random schizos on Twitter now will end up becoming the dominant ideology in 20 to 30 years.
Wait, like lefty weirdos on X, you're saying?
So the problem now is that there's no ideology that makes sense of the world today, which is why we're a civilization that's killing itself. And it should be another great question. Do you think...
Real quick, do you mean that there's no dominant ideology?
So the dominant ideology is leftism, but they're in absence of any ideology. Right. They don't believe in anything. They just believe in stopping racism. They believe in stopping sexism.
But it's not even that. They are a swarm of bees with no direction. So it's actually, I would describe the left as, have you ever seen the ant circle of death?
Yeah.
When ants follow a pheromone trail from other ants that lead into a circle, they will spin in a circle until they die. That is the left today.
Yes. Because in their system, everyone's equal, so no one can rise to leadership and give them direction.
Mm-hmm. And so they end up following each other with no goal and no pursuit. And so when you look at what the left pursues, it seemingly makes no sense. They criticize the military-industrial complex, but support the war in Ukraine.
Yes.
These things are paradoxical, but Hassan himself, on his show, within the span of 3 minutes, did exactly that.
Yes. If you want to look at thinkers like there's a lot of thinkers on the right, and the issue with the right is that there's too little unity. I spent my life at this point as a lot of conservative politics, and I talk to people who are really on the Christian side of things, who are more Nietzscheans, who are libertarians, foreign countries who have different nationalists. You have people who are boomer cons, Reagan cons, people who are basically Nazis, people who, I don't know, worship Odin. So you have like 20 factions on the right. There's no unifying ideology, and they can only agree with what they dislike under the left. Nature abhors a vacuum. And so if you have a vacuum in both the right and the left, it means it's going to be filled. And there are two ecosystems I find, because I've lived a strange life and I've looked into a lot of different industries, and most industries in America are high school, where it's done based off buddies, based off who you went to school with, who seems cool. And that's why nothing works. Nothing works because all of our leadership is done like high school. The two non-high school industries I see are parts of tech and parts of the right. And so those are the two factions I would look at to think this is where the next wave of creativity is going to come from.
I agree. I've been having some conversations with some other business leaders, and I'll keep it semi-private, but there's a management crisis.
Yeah.
I've been experiencing this, and having spoken with some other managers at other companies from small to medium, they keep saying the same thing. We hear about Gen Z and millennials quiet quitting. They don't want to work. And so people are coasting, they're doing the bare minimum, and it's resulting in social disorder and collapse. To bring it to the point of the right, I do think there's one thing that all the right factions tend to agree on. It's meritocracy in some form or another. But a meritocracy is not a unifying ideology with a leadership. So you might agree the best person for the job should have it. And then what happens? Every single person on the right says, hey, don't look at me. I don't want to be in charge.
Yeah.
No joke. There is this issue with the Republican Party where we wonder why it is they won't do anything.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how many of us are doing anything. I mean, granted, I host a show, but people say, Tim, will you run for office? And I'm like, no way, I won't do it.
Yes.
We're power averse. The Republican Party is power averse. And the Democrats are power craven with no direction. This is a recipe for an implosion.
Yes.
The right tends to be, just like you said, the right doesn't want to be in positions of political power because they look to do things in the real world that do benefit themselves, but also it's something that they find interesting or they find themselves good at or whatever. Whereas people on the left, they can organize and they're looking for a way to access power so they can essentially, I feel like it should make the world align with the way that they emotionally feel that it should be.
One of the facts that I never see people discuss on this topic, but I think it's fundamentally, this might be one of the most important facts I wish I could shove into the discourse, is that the left has controlled institutions at least since World War I or World War II. And so conservatives will often be like, oh, the reason we can't have this degree of activism and this degree of social control is because we don't believe in ourselves hard enough, because we don't take enough risks. And it's 100 years ago, leftists took over almost every single institution in the country, and they were very covert and they were very intelligent with manipulating the population until Trump. People didn't even know the left was in charge for a lot of that period, but it's why whenever news about Stalin or Mao got out, it was suppressed because our elites were sympathetic.
The New York Times and the Holodomor.
Exactly.
But that was way before World War II.
Yeah, I said World War I.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, World War I / World War II. It's a gradual process. And so the left has had power, and the thing that they really hate about Trump is that he called their bluff, because they were able to call a bluff. And this is what they mean by democracy. Democracy is the series of managerial institutions which they use to enact their will through unelected officials. And so Trump called their bluff on democracy, and they hate him so much because Trump is forcing them to come to terms with that they were the elite, because they had established this very advanced psychological manipulation of the population. And this sounds schizo, but I can explain it. It's all very easy to understand if you'd like. That goes back decades, and the right has been so browbeaten by this, where it's been generations of conservatives who, if they speak out on basic stuff, their entire lives could be ruined, who they can't operate through institutions. And so the left has become unspeakably arrogant while the right has become browbeaten. And it's...
I think the unfortunate reality is a degree of cowardice. And I know people will be offended by that, but let me say two things on this. Someone asked me when I was in Newtown, They said, I work in an industry and it's very woke and I don't know what to do. Should I speak out? And I said, here's the hard reality. If you are the first to speak out, you are in the trenches with a bunch of people and they're all terrified to look to see what's going on above. And if you stick your head out because someone's got to do it, you're going to get hurt, right? The problem is if nobody does, then you're all trapped forever. The pioneers who came to North America, quarter of them died on the way here. Then they landed on barren shores, knowing they had limited supplies in their ship, and they arrived in fall. That's the craziest thing to me. They were like, "Well, we have to." That's when they were able to set sail. They land on a barren shore, and they're like, "Okay, now most of us are going to starve to death." What a thought to be in Europe and say, "You know what? It's time to take a risk. We're probably going to die. Let's do it anyway." And now there are people who are like, "I could lose my job." And so I know it's tough because a lot of people are thinking, I can't risk losing my job. And if everyone thinks that, you are all lemmings trapped in a box until someone steps up. And I know a lot of people, they like to throw shade my way and say, easy for you to say, Tim, you're on this big show, you got a company. I worked for Vice and Disney and I spoke up and I lost those connections and I lost those contracts and I started from scratch to start over. I stuck my head out and had to start rebuilding and got to this point. I don't think it's going to be the same for everybody. Some people might have it harder, but so long as everybody on the right just simply says, I'm going to stay hidden and not say anything, then the left will continue to dominate everything.
The left dominated the 20th century because pre-internet, every single thing was a bureaucracy. The media was a bureaucracy, the government, the military, corporate America, religion, and the left is the religion of the bureaucracy, because in the leftist worldview, the bureaucracy is God, which can do anything. And so we only realized how much power the left had once the internet showed up, because the internet gave us a degree of separation. And the reason the right is starting to build up its own culture is that we've moved away from because in 1985, probably 100 people controlled almost all of the information flow in the West. Academia, the media, a variety of things. We shattered that glass. And as of now, we could use AI and the internet to completely automate out the managerial class. And Balaji, I think, Balaji's done a great job thinking about this, of going through, he says the 19th century, God was the social fabric of society. 20th century, it was the state. 21st century, it's the network. And I think the network is to our era what the bureaucracy was to the 20th century. And so you're seeing the new right emerge as this phenomena online due to that.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.